Central Maine Tech Night is a monthly evening event where, in our small group setting, founders and leaders share real advice on how they overcome challenges, capitalized on their target market, and developed their product, providing you with actionable insight for your own products and processes. You can find us on Facebook or online at centralmaine.org and click on our Tech Night tab. I'd like to thank our sponsors for this presentation this afternoon. This free event is presented by Central Maine Growth Council and is sponsored by CGI, Thomas College's Harold Alfond Institute for Business Innovation, Valley Beverage, and Bricks Co-working and Innovation Space. In addition, I would like to say hello to folks watching at home or from their office. This Tech Night is being streamed live and will be available at a later date on our CMGC YouTube channel. Here are a few Zoom tips to keep this Tech Talk running as smoothly as we possibly can. All attendees will be muted by the hosts. During the Q&A, you can unmute yourself by pressing the microphone icon found at the bottom of your screen. And please feel free to use the chat function at the bottom of your screen to submit questions to the CMGC hosts or to the speaker himself. This afternoon's February Tech Night is Forager, changing the way we source our food with David Stone, the CEO and founder. In this network Tech Talk, David will discuss how Forager is on a mission to make local food accessible by leveraging digital technology to simplify local food procurement and expand access to fresh, nutritious food for all. For those who are not familiar with Forager, Forager is building the largest local food network by simplifying the local food sourcing process from procurement to payment. And I will pass it off to David Stone. David, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
So this isn't just about Forager. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Maine tech economy and a little bit of background before we get to Forager. Since there's so few of us on, I think, let's make this more of a discussion rather than a presentation. So let's hopefully work. So we're going to do what's basically a fireside chat. I'm going to talk a little bit about the evolution of the Maine tech economy from my perspective. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the CashStar story, which was my last startup. I don't know how many of you are familiar with CashStar. Are most of you familiar with CashStar or not?
I think a few of us are, but we would love to hear it, David.
All right, and then I'll talk about Forager and how we are trying to make Maine a leader in food and ag tech. So I'm going to talk about sort of the three phases of the Maine tech economy evolution and where we are today. So we have sort of this timeline of the history and what I call kind of the foundational companies that sort of got us going. You're all familiar with WEX and IDEX, I assume. They were both startups at one point and are important in terms of the kind of history of how Maine started to become a startup community. People forget that IDEX and WEX were originally startups and they both went public. And then there were a couple of other companies that if you've been in Maine a long time, you probably may recognize them, you may not, but this was the first evolution. IDEX and WEX both went public for about $800 million at the time, and now their market cap combined is $60 billion. So just take a moment to think about that. These are two companies that were startups, just like Forager, and if any of you were involved in startups, that became significant global companies. These other entities, by and large, didn't succeed during the dot-com bust of 2000. They pretty much failed. There were a few others, and Maine went into sort of a dark phase where there was very, very little innovation and very little tech startups. And in fact, when I started CashStar, which I'll talk about later, everybody said, "You'll never succeed, kid." I was younger then, or middle-aged, because we don't have enough talent, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough infrastructure. So the next phase of the tech economy that sort of evolved after the sort of dot-com crash in the mid to late-ish 2007-8 period are this group of companies. Do most of you recognize this group of companies?
Yep.
So all of these companies actually were incredibly successful, built from nothing by and large, and combined the value of the exits, if folks understand what an exit is, which is when a company sells or IPOs and returns, the combined value of the exits was roughly $600 million. Again, this is all money that, that returns to investors, goes to employees, and goes back into the Maine economy. And it helps attract other capital because investors begin to see that, gee, I can make money on a startup in Maine and get my money back, therefore I'll reinvest. And then we've got this next generation. I'm not going to go through all of these companies in the time we have, but these are kind of the new set. This isn't everybody. I picked a few out that are interesting and are growing and are getting a lot of attention. And of course, humbly, I've included Forager because it's, my own company and the company of our team and our CEO. So these are the three phases that the foundationers, what I call pioneers, and then the current next generation of companies. And some of these will make it and become successful, and some won't. The majority probably won't. So a little bit about me. I know you know my background, sort of self-promotional slide, but anyway, I've been involved in about a dozen or so startups in one way or another, either co-founded, founded, or led. I've been fortunate that I have about $250 million of successful exits that I have achieved with my teams and myself. I'm not going to go through every one of these companies. Some of them didn't, are still around. Some of them got bought, et cetera, et cetera. Just a little as a side, the one on the bottom, the Nutritious one was an incubator. And actually, the founder and chairman of that company is the co-founder of Moderna. I actually worked for him, Dr. Nubar, but that's a story for another day. But anyway, so a lot of different tech companies and experience, and I'm very fortunate to have participated in helping these. So when you're thinking about building a startup economy, this is going to be obvious, but I'm gonna make sure I focus on it because people forget. So you need expertise and talent and focus. So what are these? So you have to kind of establish what I call as these clusters, particularly in a small state, to develop spheres of expertise where people can move from one company to another and bring their talent and their skill set. If you constantly have to pull people from other states or other markets, it's expensive, it's time consuming, it's not great. You've got to build expertise in sectors and domains. And I feel very strongly about this. So we've started to establish a fintech kind of corridor here. WEX has been an anchor, so it certainly helped, Right Express. And we have a number of companies, including CashStar, which I co-founded, that are now in this space and making Maine a recognized player in fintech and payments. The next sector is pets and vets. We have several companies, obviously IDEX and Covetrus, formerly Vets First Choice, and another one called Rare Breed. Again, we have the expertise, we have IDEX, we have several companies that have been spawned. We have healthcare, a lot of interesting companies happening in healthcare, getting a lot of attention. Another sector that is, developing in Maine. And last but not least, kind of a newer sector in my view is food and ag tech, is relatively a real new sector that we're trying to develop here. So this is important when you're in a small state. Again, you have limited resources, limited talent, limited infrastructure. Focus on sectors is very important.
David, can you just touch on for everybody what fintech is and just maybe a little color or thumbnail sketch on where it's been, where it's going?
Yeah, so it's a term that was coined probably about 12 years ago in terms of the way, or maybe 15, the way that technology and financial services began to merge and create new opportunities. The big companies initially were PayPal and then Square and a number of others, but Right Express or WEX is a primary example of fintech. So they're taking a market or a series of markets, whether it's gasoline originally with fuel with WEX, and creating a platform and a series of services and technologies around that to facilitate that. And now Right Express is in healthcare and travel payments and other companies. Wallet, which is a new company, is an app for kids, parents and kids to manage their expenses. Davo is a company that does tax software for retailers, and CashStar, which I'll talk about, is a digital gifting company that digitized the plastic gift card industry. But basically, it's technology and financial services. And because we had Right Express here, or WEX, we have talent and know-how that knows about payments and transactions and fraud and the facilitation of all of that stuff that we don't think about. When a credit card gets accepted at the point of sale or online, there's all kinds of technology and solutions behind that. Is that relatively clear? Was that Gavin asking the question?
Yeah, thank
Gavin?
you,
Sorry,
David.
Gavin, right?
Yeah, thank you. I hope that was clear for everybody.
But ask questions, please. So it really requires anchors, and because anchors are entities that are large enough. You think of an anchor in a mall, right? It helps fuel the mall for lots of other small retailers. So you have to have anchors to really help for success. So in fintech, we have WEX, Unum Insurance, and then we have Blackhawk CashStar. Blackhawk bought CashStar. It's a pretty major company. Unum is insurance, which is also financial services. In pets and vets, you have IDEX and now Covetrus, which is a very large company, former Vet's Choice. In healthcare, you have Maine Medical Center to a lesser degree, Central Maine Med, but Maine Medical Center is fueling a number of startups right now. And in food, while we don't have any big leaders in tech, we certainly have Hannaford, a number of other players like Barber Foods and Tyson, Stonewall Kitchen, Nova Seafood, and a number of smaller companies. So again, the anchors help bring talent, hire talent, train talent in the market. And without anchors, it's really difficult. So if someone's off doing, trying to develop some genetic software or something, and we don't have expertise, I would advise not to do it. So the other thing you need is people that can lay the tracks or the infrastructure or the fiber or seed the future. And what we typically call serial entrepreneurs, I made up a little joke and call them serial makers. Probably many of you know who David Shaw is. He was the founder of IDEX. I actually have been speaking to him recently. And then, Vet's First Choice and his son, Ben Shaw. And serial entrepreneurs that have had success and then create another company and then create another company or invest. Again, PayPal and Square, were founded by the same individual, Jack Dorsey. Tesla was founded by Elon Musk, who came from PayPal, and you can go on and on and on. And in Maine, we have David Shaw. Humbly, we have me, who founded or co-founded 3 companies. Bob Neveu, who founded Certify, which sold for about $150 million, and RecruiterNet. Gene Hoffman, who founded Putney and is a big investor in MedRhythms, and Pete Murray, who started Quantrix and now is the CEO of Davo. And there are others, but you need folks that were early pioneers to help set the stage and then duplicate their success. So, what do we need for startup economies for success, right? What are the fundamentals to make a startup economy? Well, you need risk-taking entrepreneurs. It kind of goes without saying, but, risk is, at a premium, and it requires people that are willing to put themselves on the line and take a lot of risk either with their own capital or other people's capital. You need talent, right? And when I started CashStar in 2007, frankly, there wasn't a ton of startup talent around. We were heading into the Great Recession, and it had been a fallow time for startups in Maine. You need capital, right? Maine historically has not been a great place to raise capital. We don't have a lot of big VC funds here. And when I was raising money for capital, everybody said, "What are you, crazy? I'm not going to put money into a little state like Maine." And then you need infrastructure. And what does infrastructure mean? Well, it's not just high-speed internet and broadband, which is obviously critical, but you also need other foundation elements organizations that can support you, like the Maine Technology Group, or like the Central Maine Tech Night that is formed, or like Startup Maine, or other entities that can help. Top Gun, things that have evolved. So you need not only fiber and data, ways to store data in the cloud. You also need other surrounding infrastructure to support you in the startup economy. Okay. You need focus and expertise, as I said already, because you need subject matter experts. You need people that understand the market, the permutations of the market, the nuances, how to acquire customers, how to develop patents, et cetera, et cetera. Good. All right. So the next star, I'm going to talk about CashStar. So I started CashStar in 2007 with a co-founder in Silicon Valley. Initially, I'll tell you a little bit about CashStar, but initially everybody said, nobody would really want to invest initially unless I put the company in Silicon Valley. Everybody pretty much was telling me, you're never going to be able to build a successful startup in Maine. Come to California. We'll give you a lot of money and we'll, support you. And I basically said, no, my mission is to, create the, a very successful tech startup in Maine and help seed the Maine economy and grow this company. So, I probably would be a lot richer if I had built the company in Silicon Valley and my co-founder was in Silicon Valley. But I wanted to prove, that these naysayers that you could actually build it. And of course, I was trying to build this company in 2007, 2008 in the Great Recession. And I don't know how many of you remember what it was like, but, I started this company in Portland, Maine, and, the town was 1/3 of the office space was empty. Restaurants were closed, retailers were closed. It was a tough time. But, essentially what CashStar did was we focused on the plastic gift card industry, $100 billion industry. And I had this intuition or sense that it was time for plastic cards to become a digital instrument and that eventually people were going to send money over the internet. Believe it or not, at this time, no money was ever sent over the internet other than through a wire. And there were no mobile phone transactions. There were no online to offline transactions. You could only purchase online with like a PayPal or a Visa card, and you could only purchase in the physical or the credit card. So CashStar created the first online to offline currency where you could actually, buy something online and use it in the physical world. And we focused on gift cards in part because of the Great Recession, in part because it felt right to me that eventually consumers would be willing to send monetary value in the form of a gift online. So we were actually the first company to do it. And, we had a lot of success and we became the primary platform for many of the top brands in the United States, powering their digital gifting experience. So if you ever send an electronic gift card from one of the top brands or do it on your phone, it's probably CashStar that was powering those experiences. And the company grew to $2 billion in gift card currency, and it sold for $175 million. Big success. And we, had 60 engineers and front end and software developers and user experience designers. And, some of them were imported, some of them were trained, and some of them came from other companies. And now many of these people are scattered through other companies in Maine. So, that's kind of the background of CashStar. And
David,
what did I learn for 5.5 years?
can I ask really quickly, and I think you hit on it a little bit, and I think it's a really interesting point. So, in and around 2007, we're coming up to the Great Recession. You're getting pushback from VC community out west. You're being told you can't make it in Maine. Can you give us some color on how you did? There was certainly less incubators, less of a ecosystem with regards to that infrastructure. Who were your mentors at that time? What programs did you take advantage of? And are there any couple of things that you felt really help you break that bottleneck to, where we are today in CashStar really being, again, that foundation that set the tone and tenor for Maine's entrepreneurial landscape? It's a real inflection point, I think, in our history of entrepreneurship.
Well, you're kind to say that. I kind of went to school. I mean, I don't want to take all the credit, certainly, because, entrepreneurs that are heroes, I think, are a dangerous thing. I mean, I think it's good up to a certain point, but I think there's a lot of, how do I put this without being critical? There's a lot of ego in a lot of entrepreneurs, and you need certain, but I was fortunate. I went to school, right? So I, worked at American Express for 14 years, did a lot of tech work, then went and did another stint in a very large insurance company in Chicago as a chief marketing officer. And then in 1996, believe it or not, I went to my first startup in 1996 when it was dial-up modems. And then over the years, I worked in many, many startups, and then had the opportunity to run a few. So, all along the way, I was learning and making mistakes as I went. And because I also worked at American Express for 14 years, I got very deeply involved in payments and financial services, and got a lot of grounding in that. And then, in Maine, frankly, there wasn't, a lot of mentors here for me. So my co-founder was somewhat of a mentor. He is the founder of coupons.com that actually IPO'd for $1.7 billion. But he was away and very distracted with, building that company. Others that helped me were other CEOs I had worked with in other companies and other venture capitalists. And then I had to build sort of an advisory board, which I'll talk about a little bit, I think, later. But there wasn't a lot here to help me. There was no Top Gun. There was, MTI invested, but they didn't have, I would say, a lot of big serial entrepreneurs. There just wasn't. There wasn't a lot around. So I had to, essentially do a lot of this on my own. But I was fortunate in that I had been in so many other startups. I'd seen most of it. And applied a lot of it. And then I had to learn, and I made some mistakes, and I'll talk about those. Is that I know I'm not giving you like the best answer, but there wasn't a lot here. There weren't a lot of mentors here. There were a handful, and I talked to a bunch of them. I'm trying to remember some of the names, but maybe it'll come to me in a minute. But now there's a lot more support, and that's what I mean by infrastructure. So these are some of my our learnings from what I saw from CashStar. If you're in an early stage startup, you gotta hire people that can wear more than one hat, because there's so many things to do, and subject matter expertise is very important, but people have got to juggle lots of balls. You still need to hire one or two, subject matter experts, but I would always urge that you hire people that are more generalists and can do multiple things, just because you're not going to have resources early on to hire 25 people. This is something I learned the hard way. We're always hungry for capital, and those entrepreneurs were always, having to raise money. We're always having to raise money, but the people that you take capital from, particularly large amounts of capital, they're going to be your, they're going to be your bedmates. They're going to be your, your family, so to speak. Just like anything else, you want them to be good, honest, ethical people that, are long-term oriented. So I always advise, even if someone's going to write you a check for 10 million or $1 million, that may seem great, but be smart about who it is. Oops. Avoid over expansion, and international markets. I've seen this a lot. Where companies chasing a new market or a new opportunity. Focus is so important. And I made the mistake at CashStar of going international too early. It was a mistake. It cost us about $1 million, and I shouldn't have done it. And just being a pioneer and someone that's always ahead of the curve, so to speak, it just wasn't a wise idea. The markets weren't ready. You need to be very proactive about your board and building an advisory group. Those are the ones that can help you. The advisory group's almost more important to me than the board, although the board is important for board control. And that's another important aspect we could spend a lot of time talking about. But having advisors that are well connected to your markets or who have been there and done that, is really significant. I do a bunch of advisory work now because I've been there and done it so much. And once you get to a certain point, you need to really plan your scaling. It gets companies, and sometimes the first CEO isn't the right person to be the next CEO, because as you go from a couple $100,000 in revenue to eventually to 5 or 10 million, and you have 70 or 80 employees, and systems, and fiduciary requirements and reporting, and all kinds of other systems infrastructure, customer service. You need people that really know how to build and scale a company, and now we have more of those. And then on the tactical side, moving away from the bigger picture, I am a huge believer in sort of this approach. Doing a lot of testing up front with your product, creating an alpha product, and working with a very small set of customers to figure out how to make it work. Then introducing a beta with maybe a few more customers, and as part of that, an MVP, which means essentially a minimally viable product is what it means, and then commercialization. And each of these steps require planning, thought, and really sort of a full-on approach to each step to get your product right and to know if it's commercially ready. So many times entrepreneurs, and particularly tech people, build products. They think it's the greatest thing in the world, and they haven't, and then they launch it, and they haven't really gone through the rigors of this approach. So, the next thing is to carefully plan and orchestrate a commercial launch. Some people just like, okay, we've got customers, we're now live. I think it's really important to put all of your sort of integrated marketing, public relations, sales efforts, product development into a planned, skilled launch to get the most bang for your buck. And I've been very fortunate and been able to do that. Often people ignore what's called UX and D, it's user experience and design. Then I say ignore it, they don't put the effort into it. And they sort of think it's a nice to have, but not critical. But if a product isn't intuitive to use, regardless if you're selling it to a doctor, an insurance company, a transit company, a restaurant, a grocer, a school, they're not going to use it, or they're only going to use it and they're going to be frustrated. So having the time and the resources and the talent to really make that experience of using your product online or in the physical world is so critical. I can't emphasize it enough. You obviously want to then make heroes and advocates out of your first reference accounts, because that's what the market's going to look to. Who can I call to vouch for you? Who else is doing this? What's their experience? So you got to do everything you can to make those first accounts, really strong and really successful. You also want to bring your customers into the product development process. You don't want to develop it in isolation or a silo. You need their input. You need an iterative kind of a approach where the customers are telling you what's working, what's not working, what features are valuable, what features you need. And then, once your product is ready, again, you really need to invest heavily in sales, because you need customers. I know that seems obvious, but again, folks don't always do that. So now I'm going to move on to Forager. Let me just stop there for a second before I do. Any questions on the CashStar story or the background or any of those lessons? All right, quiet. All right, so now I'm going to switch gears and talk about Forager. So I spent 5.5 years at CashStar building the company, and frankly, it got too large for me, and that's another thing that I should probably. It was no longer my sweet spot. Once it got to be 80 employees, and 15 million in revenue, I wasn't happy, and it was not the best situation for me. I was under a lot of pressure from my investors, and so ultimately, after 5.5 years, I left the company and took a break. It was my first break in 30 years, I'm a father of 5 kids. I never was home. Most of them were grown up, I felt it was time for a change. So the very first thing I did is I took a 3-month around the world walkabout by myself. And this journey took me to about 20 different countries on 4 or 5 different continents. And I spent about 70% of the time staying with people. Some were friends, some were acquaintances, some were people I didn't know, because I wanted to see the world through their eyes, rather than being, a pure tourist. And on that journey of discovery, renewal, exploration, I decided 2 things. One, my next venture, I wanted to have an impact, a social impact. Because I was, I was in my late 50s, and I felt it was important to start giving back. And then secondly, I observed how a lot of these people were eating, and what they were doing, and how they bought their food and where they got it from. And I began to notice that that people were buying what was in season, what was local. They'd go to the market, and that's what they would cook, or they'd go to their neighbor's house. In some cases, get the chicken that was killed and cook it. Or go far as for mushrooms. And as I began to think about this, and as I came home, I started to think about our food system, and why is it that so much of our food is packaged and processed, or comes from California? Why is it that our system is so messed up? And I could spend hours and hours talking about this, but I'll give you just the highest level, of kind of concept. And this is high level. It varies by state, but on average, we import 95% of the food we consume, and we export 95% of the food we consume. And the environmental impact is incredible, and it just makes no sense. And so, and then the next point I'm going to make, because I don't have the time, is why did I decide to do it in Maine? So there are some really good sort of underpinnings for why I started Forager in Maine. First of all, we started over 1,000 new farms in the last 10 years, a little old. Believe it or not, the majority are people 40 or younger, and 40% are women. We now have 89 cheesemakers, which puts us in the top 10 states in cheesemakers. And we're 5th on what's called the Locavore Index. So already, a strong local food system. And we have a $2 billion agricultural, economy. And that's 5 times the size of anywhere in New England, and 10 times, and similar to Pennsylvania, but we have 10x fewer people. So in short, we have an amazing, large agricultural system that is changing, with young farmers coming back to Maine, or taking over for their parents. And this is a trend that we're seeing nationally. We're starting to see a comeback of small independent farms, and we could spend hours talking about it. And as Shelley Pingree says, who I've met with a few times, that Maine was the breadbasket of the Northeast. We fed the Union Army potatoes. So why can't we be this again? And and why isn't ag tech more centric, given all of this potential and all of this economic value to the state? So those were the kind of the underpinnings of Forager, my own journey, and then the fact that we have this great resource untapped, and I include aquaculture too in my food system review, which isn't in this number. And it's while it's a great industry, it's not tech enabled yet, to the point where it can really become a major sector. So now we'll get into Forager. I want to be conscious of time, so I'm going to have to speed up here. So we are a mission-based company. When I began this company literally 8 years ago, and I began to do my research and had some grants of my own, essentially the story is, if I am a grocer or a hospital or a restaurant, it's much easier for me to buy conventional food from the conventional system, from a distributor like Cisco, or a regional distributor like Native Maine. If I want to buy from individual farms or cheesemakers or small artisanal suppliers, there's no systems. It's phone calls, it's emails, it's text, it's faxes. It's a mess, and it doesn't scale. So it became very clear to me that we needed to digitize this industry and make it much easier for wholesalers, institutions, retailers, grocers to buy from small independent farms. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. We also have been covered by, national media. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. Fast Company covered us in their United States of Innovation issue before we were even public, and Forbes covered us, early on when we were a tiny little company, because they see the potential of us being able to really significantly change an industry, and we're very proud of this recognition. We're not going to have time to go through all of this, but this is kind of the social impact. Food ag, biggest industry in the world. It has the biggest impact on our environment. It produces more CO2 than any segment. It has the biggest impact on our healthcare. We have 100 million Americans who are pre-diabetic or obese. They are also the ones that are suffering the most COVID-related deaths, as well as people in economically poor, distressed areas. Our ocean is being destroyed by all the pesticides and nitrogen fertilizers that run off. And there's a lot of communities that don't have access to food, that are in food deserts. And in Maine, particularly, we have a lot of food insecurity in the state. So, there's so much opportunity to fix our broken food system, and it just affects everything. And there's nothing, in my view, that can have a bigger impact than restructuring and rebuilding our local food system. I'm going to skip the Rue Institute just because of time, but this is part of the infrastructure now in Maine. We now have a major educational tech system in Portland. David Rue put $100 million into it. We're working on an AI project, but I don't have time to go through that. But this is another sign that the Maine tech economy is maturing. I'm going to now turn to the local food market, because for any entrepreneur, any business person, you always want to start with the market first and understand what's going on in the market. So local food now has the strongest demand of any single food category. 78% of consumers will actually change grocers to buy local. 88% of consumers will actually buy more if their grocer offered local, and 69% would buy more local if it was offered online. Pretty compelling numbers for this market. Yet local still is a fraction of what our major food consumption is in this country. And the market opportunity is growing. The market's almost $40 billion now, and local represents about 6%, 5 to 6% of the food we consume now in the United States. Still a fraction of what it should be. So grocers are getting more interested in local. Increasingly, there's a lot of reasons for it. We're not going to have all the time to talk about it, but strangely, COVID has actually made local, not strangely, more and more popular for the reasons we've discussed. But as the experts say, there are a lot of complex barriers to sourcing local. You don't need to take my word for it. You can listen to the pundits. It's just very difficult. Unless you're going to put, foragers in every store and invest heavily, you're unlikely to do it unless you're, already committed to a local food system like the Belfast Co-op or Rising Tide Co-op or Rosemont here in Portland. If you know any of those stores, they're already working with a lot of grocers. So let's look at the problems, because you always want to start with problems and understand. So the challenges of local sourcing are, as I said, it's very inefficient. It's phone calls, it's paper, it's physical checks. It's impossible to scale. There's no efficient marketplace. So if a farmer has excess crops or excess, potatoes or onions this time of year, or carrots, it's hard for them to sell them. And if you're a grocer and you're looking for local, you don't know who these farms are. And then last but not least, and very importantly, there's no data because there's no standard UPCs, no barcodes on local produce. It's very difficult then for a grocer to plan assortment and scale their products. So what we did, and I'm going to rush here now, is we basically created this digital business-to-business marketplace where a grocer, restaurant, school, prison, we actually are working with the Maine prison system, believe it or not, can see all of the farms and all of the suppliers on a single platform, what's available, how much is available, what the price is, where they deliver to, and a bunch of other stuff. And with a few clicks, place all of their orders and get it delivered to their store. And then we manage the receiving, invoicing, the payments. All of this stuff has been manual before, paper invoices, envelopes, stamps. And in our case study, we saw a 60% reduction in labor and a double-digit increase in local sourcing, which is very impressive in an industry that typically grows 1 to 2% a year. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to run a short video. Hopefully I can make this work. Can you see the screen now or no?
Yes, we can.
All right, I'm going to run a video. Hopefully I have enough bandwidth that's going to share with you what customers say about our product.
Getting food from the greenhouse to the grocery store had been a pretty old-fashioned process until a new app came along. It was the Forager app on his phone that brought Sean Hagen's carrots from his farm in Bodenham to the Rosemont Market in Portland.
Forager is focused on making locally sourced food more widely available to all. We just make it so much easier for grocers, restaurants, and schools to buy from independent farms.
Local was not something that people talked about a lot. Now, the awareness of local food, the desire to source food locally, it's what so many people are talking about.
I do try to make choices that are local, sustainable. I think small farmers is really ideally where I would get most of my produce.
So Forager kind of bypasses the traditional distribution channels. This software allows us to get product directly from a local farmer, a local purveyor, and our stores can order it directly right into the store through one software.
We need to sell what we grow. And so the technology with Forager just makes it really easy.
Instead of having multiple things kind of going on in my head, I know it's all in one place.
Information is power. And it's just more information for us, the retailers. And so it's a really powerful tool.
Definitely save time. I could say in the summer, maybe 10 to 20 hours a week.
It's a level of organization we've never had before.
So hopefully that gave you a quick snapshot of how our product works and what we do. I always feel it's better to
Getting food from the greenhouse to the grocery store.
I always feel it's better to hear the voice of the customer than the me actually telling you. So I'm going to share my screen again. I've only got a couple more minutes left, so I'm going to whip through a couple more slides, and then if there's time, people want to talk, they can. Okay. So this is. Let me just make sure I put this in presentation mode here. This is our expansion since we, I know this was in our talk. So we're now in about 8 states. We just signed a grocer, 120 store grocer in Arizona. That's part of the scaling issue. That doesn't belong there. This is some of our coverage. You can see we've gotten a lot of press. The trade press is very important to give us credibility in the, with the grocer. And then we've had consumer press to help create awareness. So again, I'm going to summarize here. Startup economies, we need risk-taking entrepreneurs, we need talent, we need capital, we need infrastructure, which cuts across, and you need to have expertise and focus. And then successful serial entrepreneurs to lay the groundwork, the people that take the risks, the people that have the arrows in their backs, et cetera. So, Forager is trying to reinvent our food supply chain and have a big impact on all of these challenges. And make Maine a leader in ag tech, because I think we can and we should be. And I want to thank you. I also want to thank David Wood, who I think is on this. If anybody needs help, he did a lot of the design work for me here and animation. So his email is here. And I'll just summarize here. Oops. The keys are, oops, sorry. The keys together are, Maine, we're in the 3rd stage of development. Sector focuses are, needs to be a key. Our keys to success are focus, focus, focus. We can be a leader, and we should be a leader. So with that, I am going to say thank you and goodbye. And if anybody has any questions, please fire them away in the couple of minutes we have left.
Great. David, thank you so much for your presentation. It was extremely informative and really well done. So thank you for taking the time with us. We do have a question in the comments section for you.
Can you read it? Sorry, Sabrina, read it out for me, please.
Yeah, definitely. So it's Fran Mullen at Healthy Northern Kennebec. So thank you, Fran, for the question. The Central Maine Gleaners Group is interested in Forager's REFED Food Waste Solutions Fund and how it's getting food to people in need. So how could Waterville benefit from this, or how could anybody benefit from it in general?
So we have worked with Glean. We had a grant from Refed, which the person who asked the question is obviously very knowledgeable. And we have worked with gleaners in a number of states. I would, please just contact me initially. I'm not sure we're going to be able to do a lot just because we have no more grant money for gleaners. But we do have the ability for gleaners to sell on our platform. And so we should talk about that. My son was actually a gleaner, just as an aside. And gleaners are near and dear to our heart. But we have no more grant money, and we don't make any money from gleaners. But for those folks that don't know who gleaners are primarily volunteers. And I'm probably not gonna do this as eloquent justice as the person who asked the questions, but basically they go and pick excess at farms, and either they get to keep some of the excess, or in some cases they may get paid a little bit, but basically they're picking the excess that would have gone to waste, and often it's given to people in need. And in our case, and we're in the New York Times for this, we delivered a lot of food. We didn't actually deliver it, we enabled it to the Navajo Nation. In Arizona and Colorado, a number of huge deliveries of melons and squashes and stuff during the COVID crisis. So if you want to talk, please reach out to me, and I'll follow up with you.
Great. Thank you so much, David. Another question we have from Samantha Catone. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Samantha. It's about food security. So how might Forager work with local food buying incentive programs, such as the Maine Harvest Bucks, for those who utilize SNAP benefits?
Yeah, it's a great question. And early on, we tried to figure out how to do that. We had Food City, which is a grocer. There's 4 or 5 of them in Maine, a couple in Massachusetts, and they wanted to go more local, and they serve, they're in some of these food deserts. We would have to integrate with a point of sale system and the SNAP or Harvest Buck system. And for those who don't know what that is for people that are engaged in SNAP, that are, that don't meet income requirements, they get about a 50% discount on food. And several grocers actually focus on local, because it supports our local farms and our local system. And it's something that we should be doing more of, frankly. But, like all things with a small startup, we'd have to figure out a way to integrate with systems so that, when a local product was bought at the grocery store and supplied by a Forager supplier, it all integrated. And we haven't been able to do that yet, but it's a really important and good idea. And whoever that is, if they want to help us figure this out, reach out to me. This is the sort of thing that takes a village, and it affects all of us and our future generations. I don't know if you know this, we have a large broccoli producer in the state of Maine. In the winter, they produce in Florida. In the summer, they produce in Maine. It's a massive farm. The broccoli is washed with chlorine. That's how they clean it. There's no regulations on that. This is what you're putting in your body. Chlorine washed conventional broccoli. It's not good for your kids. It's not good for your system, but they do it because it's easier, it's cheaper, and they wash everything with chlorine. And certainly not good for the environment, the soil, anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Quick question, and David, this has been spectacular. Thank you so much. Where do you see Forager within the short term, next 2 to 5 years? And if there is an exit in the horizon, or a big raise coming up, a big series, what does that look like?
Well, 2 to 5 years is a lifetime in a startup, all right? Several lifetimes. To transform we now account for 5% of the local food in Maine. I didn't share that one slide because I ran out of time. It's really about getting more large institutions and grocers. We have a very small program with Maine Health, right? And they tell us we need to walk the talk. We need to feed our patients healthier, local food. Actually, Central Maine Health, which we're starting a program with, has been a leader in local food. If you go into their snack bar, you're probably not going in there now. They have actually local food on the shelf, popcorn, healthy granola, not just Doritos and M&Ms, right? But the hospitals, need to get on with the program and, feed feed healthier, better food rather than, heavily caloric or just, processed food. So, we are making some inroads. As I say, the Maine Corrections Department is buying blueberries through Forager, which is great. We're a huge blueberry state. Why can't we get more blueberries into our stores? And you go to Shaw's, you can't find local Maine blueberries. You might be able to find Wyman's, but you can't find anything else. So we need to grow. We need to get to more larger grocery. We've been talking to Hannaford's for 5 years. I don't want to say anything bad about Hannaford's. They still do all of their ordering by phone. Okay. So we need to, like anything, we need to get more grocers. The more accounts we get, the more success we have. Farmers are not easy to work with either. I mean, I could go on and on and on. It's a whole different world. It's great. It's exciting. It's fun. It's great to have purpose in your life. I don't know if I saved this anywhere. I thought I had another couple of slides in here, but I don't see them. It's great to have purpose and a mission in your life. That's what's driving us is we get so many applicants for every job we post because people are searching for a mission and purpose. And certainly this is better than, I don't know, particularly during these challenging days to, subscribe to conspiracy theories or something else. So that's why we have so much interest in what we're doing. But it's tough. It's really tough changing behavior. This is the kind of the entrepreneur's dilemma, right? You're trying to change entrenched behavior that has been established for years, where grocers are calling farms if they're working with them, or they're ordering from a distributor and they don't want to switch what they're doing. So the next phase of the company is we need to raise more capital. And the only way we're going to raise more capital is we have more success. So we hope that we'll sign a couple more large grocers and some more institutions. Restaurants we've walked away from, it's a longer story. And if we do, then we will look to raise $5 to $10 million. We will keep the company in Maine, and we will try to hire other passionate, dedicated individuals who really care about transforming and rebuilding our local food system for all the reasons we had. And our vision, which I hate the term, but it's the only way to describe it, we want to build the largest network of vetted local suppliers in the country, so that any time, anywhere, anybody that wants to source local food for their school, their food bank, their restaurant, their cafeteria, their grocery store, et cetera, can go to Forager and find the best local assortment in their community and be able to get it digitally rather than the old-fashioned way.
Definitely. Thank you, David, so much. I think we can all agree, especially from your presentation, that a healthy world is a much happier world. So thank you so much for the presentation and the message that you've given to our audience. Thank you again to everyone who has joined us. I want to give a quick shout out to the Forager team. Thank you for all of the good work that you're doing in the Maine entrepreneurial environment and for all the good work that you're going to continue to do outside of the COVID context. Hopefully we'll see you guys more prominently throughout more chains. So thank you very much.
And we need to figure, and you should know, a lot of our farms are in central Maine. So, even though our headquarters is in Portland, in theory, we're not in our office anymore. A lot of our work is in central Maine. We have clients up and down the state, and a number in central Maine too. So, we need to figure out how to get Waterville and other parts of Maine, into sort of creating and spawning entrepreneurial companies. And I'm happy to help in any way I can, Sabrina, if I can be of help to anybody as a mentor or people want to reach out to me. Because it's all about creating good paying jobs and keeping our talent in Maine and giving young people opportunities to grow and flourish in this state. And I certainly think we can.
I 100% agree with you. That's one of the reasons I came back to Maine, and I'm very happy to be here and work for a great organization. So
keep up the good work, Sabrina. And thank you for having me. And if folks want to reach out, please reach out. You can give them my email and I'll try my best to get back with them. Thanks again, everybody. Stay well, stay healthy, and help your neighbors and friends during this very difficult time that we're going through. But it will get better.
Yes.
And we have a lot to look forward to. So thank you all.
Thanks, David.
So to those who are still on, I just want to make everyone aware that we have some additional tech nights in the near future. So March 11th, we have HighBite, which is an industrial software development company out of Portland, which is building solutions that address data architecture and integration challenges created by specific industries. And then on April 8th, we have Friday app, which is designed as a mission control for working from anywhere. And it will allow you to stay in sync with your team and do your best work no matter where you are. So thank you to everyone for joining us this afternoon. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your work week and a great weekend.